Hi, welcome to Overcoming the Five Deadly Sins of Strategy. First, let's start by saying most teams get strategy wrong. And for us to be able to be aligned on what strategy is, I'm going to start this presentation by defining strategy. Strategy aligns a team to tackle significant problems cohesively. That means it's focused on a problem. Clear problems help us prioritize. It, we understand it's significant because it's descriptive instead of being prescriptive. Descriptive strategies help us see and accept complexity. Lastly, we're talking about tackling problems cohesively. That is the reason why it is learning driven. You want it to lead to actions that allow us to think, understand what just happened, and adjust. Now, a lot of teams get strategy wrong. However, we're not just here to talk about the creation of strategy. My focus for today's talk is all about strategy execution. And why are we talking about strategy execution? Well, strategy execution is where most of our work will be based. Even if you're a creator of strategy, you need to be able to operationalize the strategy that you are having to deal with. This goes doubly for product because product has no discrete output. And oftentimes, our ability to take strategy and implant it into the work with the teams we work with is the difference between us being useful to the business and us not being. So, what's the number one thing people get wrong about strategy execution? It goes back to the idea of strategy being a plan. Well, if we listen to Roger Martin, who wrote Playing to Win, he says this quite clearly that strategy is the opposite of planning. Strategy is the opposite of planning. I'll say it one more time. Strategy is the opposite of planning. With that being said, how many of us sit in strategy planning meetings? It means we're not operating at the highest quality for our current vision and mission. And I'm sure after hearing strategy planning meeting, you're thinking, wow, this is something that happens often. Well, you're right. And that's the reason why 90% of organizations fail to execute their strategy successfully. In the book, The Balanced Scorecard, Robert Kaplan and David Norton talk a lot about how you can balance out the ideas of learning and operating. That said, most of us fail by thinking about having strategy be plans, and plans end up not being executed because teams can't trust them. We end up in a place like this. Now, have you ever seen a slide like this before? I want you to look at it for a second. If you know what this is, type it into the chat. If you don't worry, the answer is coming up shortly. What we're looking at is the activity dashboard in Google Docs. For those who use Google Docs, the activity dashboard is a wealth of information. It tells you who is viewing it. It tells you the trends of people viewing it. It tells you the comments and the sharing history. It gives you an idea of how your strategy is being operationalized in the business. Now, if your activity dashboard looks like this, odds are you're in this. Your strategy is here. What is this? The Google Drive graveyard. The Google Drive graveyard is a place where strategies go when people aren't using them. Because do not get it confused. Strategy that does not help us move forward towards our vision, that is a paperweight. And as much as that relies on pretty good strategy creation, the other side of it, strategy execution, is just as important. So what is your job in the world of strategy execution? As a leader, your job is to create the environment where strategy can be executed. As an individual contributor, your job is to provide data that improves strategy execution, right? How do we create and how do we improve? That all boils down to this, what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the 5 deadly sins of strategy. And those 5 deadly sins are a way that we can understand what is stopping us from executing the strategy And what you will leave here with as a leader, you'll learn tactics to stop your strategy from falling into the 5 deadly sins. Or as an IC, some questions you can ask to help bring data that'll help your strategy avoid the 5 deadly sins and ultimately avoid this, the Google Drive graveyard. So what are the 5 deadly sins? You have hiddenness, ambiguity, untrustworthiness, selfishness, and staleness. So some questions that make this more real. Does anybody know this strategy exists? Who is this strategy for? How can this strategy build trust in our work? How does this strategy help us, not me? And when did this strategy change to fit reality? And so today, you're going to learn some tactics that help guide your team to that cohesion to execute very well. And as an IC, you're going to learn questions. And to help us do that, we are going to look inside of the Bobco product team. The Bobco product team is a suite of product teams. Think of them at the portfolio level, each working through their individual sins. And so we're going to go follow their journeys as they understand the sin. We're going to learn how they dealt with the sin, and we're going to learn some ways in which we can deal with it based on our various points in our own career journey. Let's start with hiddenness, and that's the dilemma of invisible strategy. At Bobco, Jane and her leadership team designed a strategy to enhance data utilization, but failed to communicate its essence across the organization. And as the year progressed, Jane noticed a lack of proactive engagement. Teams were merely following orders without understanding the broader strategic context. So how do you know this is happening? Well, you see teams that are enthusiastic, but don't really know how to define success. What are we doing this for? And when that strategy remains unclear, it disconnects the workforce from an organization's goals, leading to disengagement and inefficiency. So as a leader, you should be working to make sure that your strategies are transparent and easily accessible. As an IC, you should be asking questions that drive the team to do so. So with Jane, she started to introduce regular strategy sessions into weekly meetings. And she ensured that the discussions about the strategic alignment and updates became a part of the regular routine. Now, that is how she absolved the problem. As an IC, what can you do? Well, you could ask these 3 questions. 1, how do our current projects directly support the company's strategic initiatives? 2, could you direct me to the latest version of our strategy document? And 3, considering our strategic goals, could we review and align our backlog accordingly? What priority should I focus on? Each of these, when asked during a one-on-one, will help make the strategy more clear. It'll either make the leader think about, hey, where's the strategy? Or just outright show you. And that'll allow you to have the conversations that move us away from hiddenness. So at Bobco, Jane implemented a strategy session in the weekly planning meetings. The team actively engaged with Jane back with one-on-ones, inquiring about and discussing strategic direction. And then Bobco ultimately standardized the strategy accessibility. Let's make this public. So it centralized the documents that people can get to with easy reference. Let's talk about ambiguity, which is the chaos of unclear strategy. Now, Bobco, despite a vibrant and exciting year at the beginning of Larry's leadership, they realized that the team produced features that no one really connected with. It didn't tie itself to the big company vision. And I'm pretty sure a lot of us felt that before, right? You've built something, but you can't really tell where it's going or how it's going. It's very reactive. And so how do you know? I mean, there's a high level of energy and commitment, but we don't have a clear understanding of what success is. And so with the ambiguity happening in the strategic goals, you really can't tell what you're doing and how you're doing it. So over the long haul, you're not going to get closer to your vision. You're just going to keep creating things. And so, how do you absolve that? One of my favorite tools to absolve ambiguity is to start every initiative, project, sprint, epic, whatever, with a definition of the 5 Ws. And what are the 5 Ws? Who, what, when, where, and why. If I can tell you the answers to the 5 Ws, then that means I have a very clear understanding of who this is for and what this current initiative, project, epic, story, where is it going? I can also connect it to learnings. I can say, hey, our persona, person being affected by these 5 Ws, changed based on our actions from the last time. Now we can adjust our strategy moving forward. Some questions you can ask as an IC: what are the success metrics for the project based on the 5 Ws? In what ways does this initiative benefit our target customer? I'd like to narrate our strategy to stakeholders using key elements. Could you confirm their alignment with our strategic goals? Can you confirm that the 5 Ws match? And so with Larry revamped the presentation format to start with the 5 Ws, outlining clearly who the project was for, what was it supposed to achieve, when and where it would take place, and why it was important. That clarity helped everyone understand their work more explicitly, which led to Bobco integrating the learned insights into subsequent projects. So everybody ended up becoming better just by having those 5 Ws at hand. Untrustworthiness, the peril of secrecy. Hannah's product department was seen as the black hole of information, and teams felt resistance. It was a level of distrust because teams did not see themselves or what was happening within Hannah's team. And so they didn't want to collaborate. Secrecy fosters suspicion. Even if you don't mean to be or tell secrets, our teams tend to work on a lot of projects. So without being very clear about what's working, what's not, you can find yourself moving forward and teams wondering just what's happening over there. And if they don't know what's happening, they can't tell a story, then they will create their own. And so you want to build trust by aligning your strategies, and you want to talk about your wins and losses. If you are an IC, you want to ask about who are the key contacts in the team or any other team to build strategic relationships. Who's your point person? What steps should we take if a project fails? Right? Failure is a part of the game. We need to be transparent about our changes just as much as we are about our successes. Nobody likes a perfect team. Last, I'm looking to create collaboration with other teams. So what are our best practices here? Again, by asking your leader this, what you're telling them is, I need some outside connection. I need to tell a better story. And so good leaders will go out and find those people for you. And then you're able to be more self-sufficient. Meanwhile, you're building trust inside of the organization. Of course, always helpful. So Hannah began to share her detailed postmortems with all the department leaders, highlighting both success and failure. That transparency not only clarified the team's intentions, but it brought constructive feedback, collaboration. The one thing that's free is advice. Everyone wants to give advice. Leverage that as a product team to bring people in and build trust in the work that you're doing. It also allowed the team to talk about success and failure openly. We all know things fail. As a matter of fact, 60 to 90% of ideas have neutral or negative value, according to Ron Kohavi. And so if we're living in that much failure, we're never talking about failure, and all these other teams see where products aren't going anywhere, sales sees it's not selling, customer success sees it's not expanding, we're not fooling anyone. So it's important for us to tell the truth and to tell it often. We can be leaders in transparency, and I think product should be. Selfishness, the shortcomings of siloed success. Now, Scott's strategy at Bobco seemed effective, but proved to be too narrowly focused on his own team. And the other teams didn't like that. And so if your initiatives are telling a story that it's only benefiting you, or it's only benefiting engineering, or it's only benefiting something selfish, then other groups and departments are going to say, I don't need to engage with you. It's not helping us. Even if it's going to help them in the long run, right? I've seen teams who are building things that are going to help win rate for sales, but sales is not engaging. Why? Because that product team is not telling that story to that sales team as to why it will help them. And so your job as a product person is to, one, realize product is not a solo sport, and two, start to bring other folks in so they're not seeing you as selfish. And the way you're going to do that is, as an IC, you're going to ask some questions around, is the strategy enhancing value across the organization? How the impact of strategy is, what's the impact of this strategy on every department? Has been fully assessed? Could I spend a day with Team X to better understand how the product impacts their work, right? You are learning a lot about the rest of the organization to bring back to the team. And as a leader, you can induce different workshops. One of my favorites is a lean coffee session. Now, lean coffee is all about how do we get people to take a look at this one thing, right? It could be a strategy, it could be an initiative. We talk about it for 5 to 10 minutes, and then have everybody in the room comment, right? They'll write it on Post-it notes, everyone votes, and then we discuss about the notes. And those notes do two things. One, it allows people to hear themselves. They feel heard within the product strategy. And two, you as a product leader or product manager even have the ability to see where other teams are coming from. And you can start to build those pre-objections in your work. Balco becomes a culture of inclusivity because of this. Staleness, the risk of complacency. Alicia's team at Bobco enjoyed early success with their strategy, but failed to adapt to the dynamic market, and things went worse. Things got bad. Strategy isn't a plan. Plans are very static. Strategies are not. Strategies adapt to the situation that is in front of them. And so it becomes very, very important that you change your strategy. Now, I often get questions where people tell me, how often is changing your strategy important? Do we change it all the time? First of all, I always think that's a false question, because most teams do not change their strategy if they have a strategy engaged, right? They ride with it for the entire year. Now, there are teams without a strategy that change a lot. Now, that's a different problem. And so if you have a strategy, you're probably not changing it enough. If you do not have a strategy, well, you don't have a strategy, so you're just reacting. Anywho, if you are in a place where the strategy isn't changing enough, you want to ask some questions. If you're an IC, when's the last update? Ask people, wait, when's the last time we changed this? Which recent market trends and performance metrics should be prioritized? That's another question. It's kind of going around that asks, hey, what's happening in the world? And how do we put this back into the work that we're doing? And three, you can ask about process. What methods can we employ to continuously integrate fresh insights? Because it's all about learning. And if you are not iterating, you're not learning. And if you're not learning, well, you're in trouble. So Alicia instituted monthly strategy update sessions. Her team infused fresh data and feedback into the strategy regularly, and Bobco evolved by maintaining a competitive edge. These are also great meetings to bring other people in, right? The hiddenness of a stale strategy is gone. Remember, strategy is dynamic. How effectively are we communicating this strategy across all levels of our organization? Can every team articulate who benefits from this strategy and how it supports our mission? What measures are we taking to ensure that this strategy is perceived as credible? Does this strategy promote collaboration? And what triggers and processes do we have to keep adapting, keep learning? Remember, good strategy is focused on a problem, descriptive, and learning driven. If you're operating your strategy correctly, then you will often be able to focus on these three things, learn from these three things, grow with these three things. Your strategy will address the world in these three ways. Now, before we move forward, I'd love for your feedback. And so I'm going to give you a second, take your phones out. I'll also drop this in the chat. Here's a link. Take your phone and fill out this feedback. I am looking to make this talk better. And with your help, I will be able to do so. So please, I'm going to be quiet for a moment and allow you to fill this out. All right. And so our takeaways: communication is fundamental. Trust and transparency are crucial. And you want to have a level of flexibility with your strategy. That is how you avoid this. And as product people, if we are not avoiding this, then we aren't bringing the value to the organization. And this is how our product strategies go off the rails. This is how we build crazy products that don't really affect our customers. And this is how we lose trust. Thank you for joining me today. And I hope you enjoy the rest of these talks. See you at Talk Shop. Bye.